It was a legal transaction. We broke God's law. Jesus paid our fine. That means God can dismiss our case on the day of judgment upon
So they're using politics to advance what is essentially a religious goal. That is the heart of the evolution versus creationism
issue.
issue.
Of every human being, no matter what they believe, there's something that says, I don't want to die.
Well, I think we need to look really not at what polls show, but what the scientific evidence shows.
Polls show that nearly half the American public believes that people didn't evolve from lower life forms, but were created in our present form by God.
Personal story segment tonight. Polls say about 10% of American adults do not believe in God.
We have in our country good evolutionists or good atheists and bad atheists. Evolution is crazy. People don't think very deeply.
Because they're not interested in developing evidence.
Fairy tale for grown-ups.
They're not interested in engaging in this process of peer review, of publishing their work, of going to scientific meetings and trying to win a scientific consensus.
Challenging that industry is actor Kirk Cameron.
We wouldn't want to teach something in the public schools that was factually incorrect.
In effect, what they want to do is to do an end run around the entire scientific process by appealing to boards of education.
University professors, 1 in 4 in universities and colleges is atheistic or agnostic.
Or legislatures to insert their ideas into the classroom.
Exactly what you want to do. You want to teach your book of Genesis as if it's some kind of literal scientific truth instead of maybe possibly metaphor or lots of other history. You want to bring it in as science. It's not going to fly.
Evolution is the story of our past.
Even though they haven't won a scientific consensus.
What a lot of, unfortunately, textbooks lead people to misunderstand is that a really good theory grows up into a law.
President Bush has suggested that this theory of intelligent design should be taught in public school classrooms.
So you have to ask yourself, what's fair about that?
I'm a pretty simple guy. I'm looking into a camera lens right now, and I conclude that someone must have made this camera lens. It's pretty complex. Now, you have an eye that has 137 million light-sensitive cells, far more complex than this camera lens.
Is that the so-called evidence against evolution is not evidence. It's nonsense.
You know, God gave us 6 senses. The 6th sense is common sense, and that's what the atheist and the evolutionist lack. You've just got to think for a moment.
You know, mainstream science throughout history has been challenged by questions.
If the camera lens can't come together without a designer, neither can your eye. Design proves to a guy like me that there is a designer.
However, this is easily refutable because if the eye is of God's perfect creation, then why does a large majority of the world wear glasses?
But if I say to you, I don't believe my Ford truck had a maker, that means I think the Ford truck was created by nothing, which is scientifically impossible.
The implication of intelligent design is that that God is a very, very bad engineer. I mean, an engineer who have designed an eye with the optic nerve having to cross the retina will be fired.
Christians need to stand up and realize that we don't need to be intimidated by atheists. They're not intelligent. The Bible says they're fools, and there's a right way to share our faith with them. The answer isn't to argue with them.
Answer the question, yes or no. Age of the Earth.
You are trying to confuse the issue of conflating.
Age of the Earth. Answer the question.
I am trying to answer the question. I'm trying to answer the question.
How old is it, Charmaine?
I can't get a word in.
And all through the fossil record and life, we don't find one of these. A crocoduck.
Here is this sort of animal who's coming out of the ocean without lungs. So he comes out with gills, goes, runs back to water and just keeps coming out until lungs develop. Yeah.
So to pretend to students that there is a real controversy here is to mislead them.
And that dinosaurs and humans lived at the same time.
But we have to realize, first of all, the word dinosaur doesn't appear in the Bible. Nowhere in the Bible. And there's reasons for that, very good reasons.
Dinosaurs died because they were too big to fit on Noah's Ark, or that they existed alongside human beings.
The King James Version was translated in 1611, long before the word dinosaur was even invented. So the basic English translation that's still very commonly used hasn't been around very long.
The answer isn't to argue with them.
Why are you afraid to answer the question?
Why are you afraid of the fact that 90% of the American people do believe in God?
Plus, Darwin said in order to prove evolution, which is the #1 alternative to God, you've got to be able to prove transitional forms, one animal transitioning into another.
So to pretend to students that there is a real controversy here is to mislead them. And the only reason to do that is so that people will be afraid to teach evolution.
Answer the question, yes or no. Age of the Earth.
Nothing created everything.
You are trying to confuse the issue of conflating.
Age of the Earth. Answer the question.
The answer isn't to argue with them.
How old is it?
I'm trying to answer the question.
How old is it, Charmaine?
I can't get a word in.
Yeah. What we've got to do is do what Jesus did and speak to the conscience.
I don't want to have to worship a God that it is not smart enough to do as well as a human engineer.
To have things made, you've got to have a maker. You can't have a creation without a creator. Show me a building that didn't have a builder.
God making this trivial, obvious mistake and errors of design, well, maybe their God does those things, certainly not mine.